What's up, everybody? It's me, Illusion, here with a very special guest today on our second episode of the Illusion podcast. Uh, would you like to introduce yourself today to the podcast, Chris?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name's Chris. Me and Illusion, we go back a couple years,
A couple years now.
4 years or so.
About yeah.
Uh, I went on to finish a political science degree and have been working in politics the last 2.5, almost 3 years. And we got a big year coming up next. And I'm here to answer some questions. Very excited to be here. What do you got for me?
Okay, so one of the first questions I have is quick question is you got your political science degree. You've been working in politics. Specifically, what do you do when it comes to working in politics? Is it specifically elections, or like what exactly is it that you do or have done so far?
Well, for any poli sci majors that are listening in,
Yeah.
um, there are two tracks right out of college. You have your law school track, and if you want to just dive right into it, campaigning is always hiring and a great resume builder. Even while in college, um, to have that field experience that's not going to consume 40 hours a week, you can do that. And I mean, that's the track that I ultimately stuck with. Law school was always in the back of my mind, but it was never a priority. Um, I can also see how there are military applications to a political science degree. So you could bring that to the military and become a foreign service officer, work for the State Department, deal with international relations. Uh, you could go an economic route. If you have a poli sci major with an economics minor, there are a bunch of paths. I specifically chose campaigning because it was first offered.
Yeah.
I didn't have a double major or even a minor. I just had the political science, and it timed out perfectly. Finished school spring of 21, summer of 21. They were hiring up in Virginia, and one of my good buddies down from Fort Myers was already working on the campaign, so he got the ball rolling, and that was the foot in the door.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's I think that's the biggest struggle for our generation is taking that first step, right? Where do you begin? I was definitely fortunate to have that connection ahead of time so that I could say, "Hey, I'm ready to go." And say, "Okay, great, you're going here."
So,
And I love.
oh, I'm sorry. Would you say when it comes to getting into politics, would you say it's more who you know, more opportunity based like that, or is it just you do these certain things, you will move up in politics? Okay.
When it comes time for candidates to come to this area, they're going to look for that guy.
Okay. Okay. I gotcha. So let's change the topic just a little bit. Stick with politics, but I do want to ask you about elections, since you do work in campaigning and things like that. When it comes to elections in America, do you think there's any sense of, in any way, fraudulent activity, or do you think our election process, the way it's set up, is as rigorous as it can be?
Yeah, there's fraud. I mean, there's been fraud every single election since the 1780s, right? Like, there's always a margin of error, either by human counting or fraud.
Okay.
Where 2020 there were I think about the video that you posted about a year ago. with the Secretary of State from Colorado,
What'd you think
right?
about
Like,
that?
it makes sense. Like in 2021, when I first started,
Yeah.
everyone was fired up. That was a big topic of discussion. The
Really?
Dominion machines.
What
There
was
was a
the
lot
talk
of
around?
distrust.
What was the talk around you guys when it comes to the Dominion machines around that time?
Well, it was different in each place.
Okay.
In Virginia, the discussion was early voting. That's where they get you. You go in early, you plug in you cast your ballot, and then it sits there. It sits there for however long that early voting period is, and then on election day, everything is uploaded, and you could see the difference between right.
I can see at
Um,
least the concern with that.
right. And then in Georgia, it was definitely the same thing, like Dominion voting machines, but they were more focused on the primary season.
Yeah.
And then election day. Georgia Republicans are not the biggest fans of their Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger because of 2020. Um,
What specifically do they have an issue when it comes to him?
that there wasn't a fight to recount to recertify, but they hold that same grudge against Brian Kemp, who was Secretary of State before Raffensperger. So it's like there's a lot of distrust. Um, to answer your question, yes, there is some degree of fraud. Is it on the scale of overturning elections?
Yeah. Do you think it's at that point?
It could be, but there's not sufficient data,
Yeah.
right? But I will say that as technology gets exponentially better every single year, the media companies and social media are factoring into those decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think about in mid 2020 when Fox broke the story about the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yeah.
And then it was a topic of conversation for about a week, and then it was smothered.
Didn't the New
Why?
York Post actually weren't they the first ones to post about it like all the way back in like 2019?
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's like there was a small little conversation about it, but then every other media outlet covered it up, smothered it until after the election. And I think that the influence that social media and our television stations have in our life is massive. So for that story to be censored
Yeah.
so close to election time,
Yeah.
that would have hurt Joe Biden.
True.
I think that if that story had not gotten covered up, there would have been a difference in the outcome of the election.
Yeah.
I think about Georgia, like I believe the numbers. I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but both candidates, .ga.gov, 2020. Let me scroll down. Election data hub. Both candidates were below 50%. Like Joe Biden had 49 point something. Donald Trump had 49 point something.
Yeah.
Biden got the edge by like 0.4% of the vote. But in a presidential election, you don't need the 50%. You just need 270 electoral votes. Um,
nomination or to be elected.
right. So there's that part about it. That would have been flipped. I firmly believe that Donald Trump would have won Georgia if the Hunter Biden laptop story was not systemically suppressed.
Now, and going off of that point, A, why do you think it was systematically suppressed? And B, well, first let's start with that. Why do you think it was suppressed? We'll start with that question.
Why the story was suppressed?
Why do you personally think the story was suppressed? And
The story was.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. The story was suppressed because the media were so against Donald Trump. Just the idea of him,
Yeah.
right? Disregard and anything that he did internationally, anything that he did for the economy. You just got butthurt about the tweets. And all right, fine, if you're a little bit sensitive, okay.
Do you think it was
But
specifically the tweets, or like, do you think it was like
it was definitely
the Trump derangement syndrome with a lot of folks? And I'm not one to be totally on Trump's side, but I have noticed that's a term I've heard thrown around, but it is you can't apply it to certain individuals. There is a certain hatred against anything he says or does, even if some of it sounds like common sense.
Yeah.
I think it's just the tweets that leads that.
No, definitely not. I think a majority of the people, yeah, like you had no other reason other than maybe you just didn't like the snarky comments that he made to the media, because he definitely did that. But for example, my parents grew up in New York. They watched Donald Trump in his prime as a 30, 40, 50-year-old throughout the city. And from their perspective, they don't like the person. They think that, yeah, he was a very successful businessman and helped out his community, but the person is not favorable. And I've had many discussions with my mom about Donald Trump. It's like, okay, like, why? What's the thing? What's
Yeah,
what's the grudge?
Yeah, what's the thing that
Like,
really caused? Because like, I remember watching a couple clips from this one comedian. His name is Jimmy Dore. If you've ever heard him.
Okay.
And one of the topics he was bringing up that I thought was pretty interesting was Trump at one point had, I can't remember if it was Syria or somewhere else that we were at, but our military troops were there, and the media asked him like why we were there, and he said like we're there for the oil. And I remember in the media it was
We're there for what?
he said we're there for the oil.
Oil. Yeah.
Like quote, we're there for the oil. And I remember that was a very big thing because I know like talking points where the military industrial complex is upset because Trump is basically taking the cat out of the bag with stating what our foreign policy really is and what we're doing in these other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that might be also part of when it comes to institutional hatred towards Donald Trump, not just like regular folks like you and me, but when it comes to media corporations or when it comes to very influential institutions, the hatred from those people, do you think that's tailored because of things like that, or do you think it's something else?
That's a great point, and I have to agree with it. That you know, Donald Trump brings a very anti-establishment presence to any stage that he speaks on. Anytime he could get any public viewership, he rocks the boat a little bit.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
I do want to talk about the military-industrial complex because I love that video. I did.
I got you.
Um,
Write it down right now so we don't forget.
because like when I say establishment, yes, there is definitely an establishment GOP, an establishment DNC, right? Like
Yeah.
when I say establishment GOP, I think Mike Pence. That's very establishment Republican, right?
Or what about
Uh,
what's that Nancy girl?
Nikki Haley is on that not anti, but non-establishment side of the equation. When I look at
Yeah.
when I watch these debates, right? I'd probably say at this point, there's like one, maybe two establishment type of candidates, right? And then the other two are non-status quo, definitely on the conservative side, but strictly party lines,
Yeah.
maybe not so much. So to answer the original question, I believe that the establishment
Mhm.
of the economy, Wall Street, both parties, Washington D.C., just the establishment of it,
Yeah.
the global, the geopolitical establishment that works its way into every single corner
You mean like
of
United Nations, World Economic Forum kind of
right,
institutions?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, World Health Organization, those type of things. They were like, oh, like this guy's rocking the boat.
Mm.
So I think there was a lot of distaste for that type of rhetoric. Um, is it just? No, because I don't think that the electorate was ready for how confident he was in everything that he said, and he never like stepped back from it. And I think that's what forced the media's hands to say, okay, we have to stop this guy at any cost. Oh, the Democrat candidate, their son has this really bad story. Okay, well, like let's suppress it. Um, yeah, like ultimately, he's anti-establishment and not exactly a third party, but
Mhm. But not exactly Republican, you would say?
yeah, not party like most party line boxes were checked, but there were some that were left unchecked.
Okay. Do you think well actually okay, so you brought up the military industrial complex. So I want to talk to you about that. um what is your thoughts on the military industrial complex? Do you think it's a at this point, do you think it is a body of organizations that do serve us and do serve the world in a as honest as they can, or do you think it has lost its way and is kind of a plague on the earth for pretty much everybody but a small group of individuals?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So when I watched that video, your video that you posted about a year ago, yeah, about a year ago,
About a year at this point.
um, well, one of my critical comments on it
Yeah.
is uh, it was very domestic focused,
Mm.
um, which yeah, like you're not wrong. Like I don't believe that you said anything dishonest in that video. Um, and it was definitely an introspective view.
Yeah.
But I mean, in truth, I'm an Eisenhower Republican. Dwight D. Eisenhower is my favorite president of all time.
Yeah.
Um, and he made that speech about the military industrial complex across the world. It's not just here at home.
It's for everybody.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to take for World War III to begin?
Right now, with the climate that we're in, I think if we continue to instigate with Ukraine and then we also go full in and jump into the Israel Hamas situation, I think that is the quickest way to get us full speed ahead towards World War III. I think if we don't put the brakes on this, and I think if we don't, I understand treaties and I understand when different nations are attacked, there's a code and there is you said you were going to protect us and you do have to fulfill that. But there is also the possibility that when it comes to attacks, they're not always what the media itself portrays is actually happening in those things. So I think before we go full speed ahead and start killing people and attacking people and getting ourselves into deeper debt and deeper controversies with other nations, I think we should really take a step back and think, hey, if we go in this, is this going to be like just regular day for us, or are we really poking the bear to something we don't really understand? Or are we poking something that we don't really fully comprehend on what we're getting into? That's what I think is the closest at this climate to World War III.
Okay. I like that answer. Full body. All right, so I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I should ask the question after I said this. Say this. It's okay. It's out there. I believe that Eisenhower's hand was forced to make that speech because of his predecessor.
Okay.
Because of Harry Truman. Once Harry Truman dropped that nuke on both of them, on Japan, it changed the world.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the better. I mean, yeah, we've definitely had incredible technological growth, and life expectancy has increased since then, slowly back on the decrease, but overall an increase. So generally, life didn't get worse, but everything got a lot more tense, and conflict got far more frequent, right? When Harry Truman established NATO and the UN and ordered the Truman Doctrine to prevent communist ideology to spread throughout the world that enabled interventionism. And now there's a whole international organization, United Nations, specifically for the purpose of alliances and to defend domestic and international threats to our allies and our homeland. And the Truman Doctrine has been used to start or to get into the Korean War and in Vietnam, and Reagan used it in Central America. And we've seen it. We've seen it all throughout every decade since that. And I firmly believe that, at that point, we became the world police, and I think that we are slowly losing that authority. There was that bipolar uh, hegemon of the United States and the USSR, and then the USSR fell, and we had a nice grip on power throughout the 90s. And then we were attacked on 9/11, and against every precedent in the Constitution, set by the Constitution, George Bush, without conferring with Congress, declared war. You have to go to Congress for a declaration of war. Well, because he did not declare war on a nation, on a nation state that is a part of the UN, right? He declared a war on terrorism. He declared a war on an ideology. And so I think that, right, it's like how do you kill an idea? You can't. You can kill people, but the idea that those people stood for will keep standing. So then we spent 20 years lighting the Middle East on fire. And then it was looking like it was coming to a close. And then we botched the pullout from Afghanistan and left hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military-grade weapons there for whoever get first come first serve. And then shortly after that, no, before I get into that, the military-industrial complex is definitely an internal crisis. The fact that we are spending $850 billion a year on defense spending keeps us as the world police, sure. But also, I question why it keeps getting higher. The budget keeps increasing.
Or the fact
right?
that you still can't pass an audit on.
That's a fantastic point.
And do you remember in the video, I can't remember what exactly her title was, but she was interviewing Jon Stewart, and she was in control of the money when it comes to the State Department, and just her tone, her attitude was like, "You peasant! Why? I can't believe you're even asking me these questions."
Yeah, I believe she was she worked inside the Defense Department, but you're right. She was very defensive in her answers.
She couldn't believe Jon Stewart was asking her those questions, but they were very simple. And to me, at least, seemed like very reasonable, simple questions.
Right.
And just the fact that it's bad enough, in my opinion, that as you're one of the most sophisticated and advanced probably the most sophisticated and advanced institution in the entire world. You have more manpower in technology than anywhere else in the world. And you guys can't figure out how to pass an audit? That everybody else, every other citizen, everybody else has to do? You have a whole... I can't understand that. And then I also can't understand how when you get called out on it, you have such a defensive tone and you can't even believe questions are being asked to you. That just makes me question it even more. Because it's like, if you could at least come out and say, hey, you know what, we really dropped the ball on this. This is bad. And we get it. And we're going to fix this. I wouldn't be as weird about it. But the defensiveness is I don't like that. Or one other thing too was there's 2 points in history where they, like the state secretary came out and told us that we lost $2.4 trillion. One of them was right before 9/11, and then one of them was just recently again, right around the Ukraine war. $2 trillion just goes missing. How do you lose $2 trillion?
Well, it's because every cent that the government spends is borrowed money. Like
From the
what's that?
From the Fed.
No, just like the United States budget. I think that this year is $3.4 billion. Well, no, let's not get into the big dollar. Let's keep it small dollar. Kitchen table talk.
Okay.
Every dollar that you pay in taxes, I want to pull up the graphic because that's it. I got it right now.
No, you're good.
So I don't want to get the numbers wrong, you know?
No, I actually really appreciate that you're doing that.
Ultimately, when I look for this, why is the economy so bad? It's because we don't have capital. You know, everything that we are using is in some way, shape, or form borrowed. Right? My car payment, I have a car payment because I had to take out a loan to purchase the value of the car, and then now I have to repay the bank for that loan. That's the car payment. But the mortgages, there's a cloud of debt that looms over us. When I think about it, I was born in 97, right? When I was born in 1997, my first breath of American freedom, that first breath of air, if you thought about it in the form of the national deficit, that first breath of air cost me $29,000. Ouch. That sucks. That's my fair share of the national debt. And I said deficit. I meant debt. The national debt. Children born today, they owe per person $259,000 for the first breath of American air. That's how bad the national debt is. We are sitting at $33,728,000,000,000 in debt. And it's just ticking up. It's getting higher and higher. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to fix it. US debt club. Just getting higher and higher and higher. I'm going to continue looking for that graphic. But
okay, when it comes to, or actually no, continue with your point. I can ask you that in just a moment.
No, go ahead. Like at this point, I'm looking for the graphic.
So, okay, that's like another concern I have when it comes to, since we were talking about the military-industrial complex, it concerns me. Like, I can't. Who is that? I can't remember what she works for. She's this really older lady. She got white hair. She's in charge of the. She's the treasury.
Jenny Yellen.
Her. She just did
Treasury.
Treasury. Yeah. she just did a interview recently, and they asked her. They were like, "Hey, basically the question was, does America have enough to fund both the wars in Ukraine and Israel?" And she said, without any hesitation, we could fund those wars, no problem. And it's like, I hear things like what you just showed me when it comes to the debt. I literally see the effects of the debt in my own life and all of my other friends' life. Like everybody's struggling. It doesn't even matter people who have really good paying jobs. Everybody I know is struggling. And
Right.
then I hear her say, "No, it's no problem. We can just take out more money." And it's just like, at what point does reality hit for America, where it's like, even though you want to have the option of borrowing more money, it's not even possible anymore.
All right, so you want to hear the per dollar, how our budget looks?
Yeah.
So the federal budget spending by category per dollar, the mandatory spending. So that's your Social Security, your Medicare, Medicaid. Out of that $1, 63 cents is already spent. 63 cents of that dollar is already spent. 10 cents is the interest on the debt that we have owed. So right off the gate, 73 cents of that first dollar is gone. Every dollar that you pay in taxes, the government is left with 27 cents of it to play with in discretionary spending. And then that includes transportation, education, defense, other programs. See this next one. I'm literally going through. I'm going to send you this link as it's an hour-long video, but if you're interested in where we're at financially as a nation,
I'll definitely put it in the description as well too. So anybody wants to check it out, they can check it out.
Of the 27 cents, defense spending is 13 cents. So that leaves 14 cents in total of your $1 paid in taxes for transportation, education, veteran benefits and services, social services, natural resources, science, space and technology, and other programs too. 14 cents of your dollar is going towards things that we could potentially use in our day-to-day life. I think that's an excellent statement on where we are at financially as a nation, that your dollar is worth 14 cents to the government. That's how much debt the United States is in.
Wow.
And I mean, that's the truth of it. You made a point earlier, but I forgot.
It was a question. It was, well, now knowing all of this, like, and to go back to the original question, it was, when do you think the party ends? When do you think reality finally sets in and hits us to where even though we want to still borrow, because they're going to keep borrowing until we can't. So when does that moment of we just can't happen?
Well, to bring it back to the military-industrial complex, the best part of war is it stimulates the economy. It forces the production of firearms and ammunition. It forces extra workers in the workforce. Um, it stimulates the economy, and not for the best reasons, but it does do that. And I believe that that happens in World War III. Um, you want to know my take on
I do.
that? My take on that is in 1914, they didn't call it World War One. They called it the Great War. The Great War. And when World War II kicked off, they didn't call it World War II when it first kicked off, right? So I firmly believe that history will look back and try to pin the beginning on World War III. And I could see the argument of the 2016 election and saying that there might have been Russian interference. There was definitely Russian interference. There was. And then Trump won and kept everyone at bay. Like, it was almost peaceful. Almost. Yeah. Not exactly, but it was almost there.
Compared to where we're at today.
Right. And I could understand the argument for that being the starting point. The green flag, right? But I think the better starting point is January 3rd, 2020, when President Trump took out General Soleimani of Iran. That shot tensions internationally through the roof. Like, okay, now we are actively engaged in conflict with Iran because we just took out one of their top generals. And then, not even a month and a half later, I guess it was closer to 2 months, right? Coronavirus. And then a month after that, the world shut down. And whether it was intentional or unintentional, the virus came from China. You could also make the argument that the chemicals that produce fentanyl come from China. Yeah, they are taken to Mexico and then run through the process to become fentanyl. But that comes from China. And I believe that World War III began when Trump struck Iran. And then China got in, whether it was intentional or unintentional, through a biochemical warfare, which is incredibly illegal, so many war crimes. But everything kind of stacked up, right? The entire global economy shut down. And the world stayed that way for almost 2 years. Fortunately, like, we only had a couple months of it. I'm grateful for that. I'm blessed for that we did not get such a large chunk of time in our mid-20s stuck at home. But there are a lot of countries that were. And then, just as we are taking our first couple months out of the pandemic, Russia invades Ukraine. And then tensions in Taiwan start to pick up because, Russia did that to Ukraine. Is China going to do that to Taiwan? And then Nancy Pelosi goes over to Taiwan and stokes the flames. Yeah. And then we're almost caught up to Hamas attacking Israel. And then that goes back to 2001. Right? Like, Prime Minister Netanyahu declared war. But did he declare war on Palestine or Hamas, the anti-Zionist ideology? Right? Now, Palestine is not a United Nations recognized state.
Yeah.
You need to have sovereignty to become a recognized state. So you have to have an absolutely undisputed border, an undisputed population, and a government to organize that population. And while, yeah, sure, there's a government, they don't have as much power as Hamas does. And yeah, they have a population, but that population disagrees about the borders. So Palestine is not considered a nation. So when that conversation of, we have to help Israel because they're our ally, say, okay, I don't know, I do not know what kind of assistance Israel provided the United States on our war on terror. I don't know. But that would be the same scenario, right? Like, Al-Qaeda attacked us, we declared a war on terrorism, and then spent 20 years trying to kill an ideology just for a similar ideology to happen a few years later. Probably with the same weapons that we left there. So I think that we're in it. I think that we are actively engaged in World War III, and we're not aware of it because it's contemporary. It's still happening. History is still being made.
I never thought about it like that, man. To be honest with you, that's
heavy.
And like, I can't really disagree with it because it does make a lot of sense. Because like, you're right, especially like when you brought up the points of like World War I and World War II. They didn't start out calling it like what we today now know as like World War I, World War II. Like, it always starts as like something different. It always starts as like something small. It's not like countries just like are cool and then all of a sudden we all just start blowing each other up. It's like a methodical process that happens over like a long span of time until it just finally pops.
Right.
So, for us to be like already in like the methodical stage and like you could just feel like the birthing pains just get worse and worse and worse, like, I can't disagree with you on that point. I really can't. And I don't. Being in this point, do you think our leaders, well, obviously, if this is what's going on, our leaders know that, correct? And know that we're in this?
I mean,
if we are.
Yeah, it's definitely my opinion that we are actively, I would make the argument that it wasn't really World War II until Pearl Harbor. And then, okay, now you involve the West. And now we're in. And we are sort of in it in a proxy manner. Like Nicaragua during the Reagan administration. We didn't actually have troops down there, but we were funding the insurgency that was attacking the government. So we are paying Ukraine to fight this war as a proxy for us. We are paying Israel to, right, which, I mean, I think that both Ukraine and Israel have their own right to retaliate. They do. But we are definitely taking lion's share of the funding, in my opinion. And I worry. Like, I genuinely worry, is there going to be another Pearl Harbor type of event that pushes, that's the final straw. Right. Because, yes, I think that these last 4 years were the beginning. I don't think that it's started its climb, and it certainly hasn't reached a climax, but I don't see the tensions dying down until there is a snap in the tension. And then when that happens, the economy will recover. And I hate that it takes getting to that point before we have value in our own country and our jobs, in society, right? Like, not to say that we're not valuable. We are. But it feels like all of the work that we are putting in, we are not getting it back. And if we do, it's years later and say, okay, like, I don't really need the PlayStation 4 now. PlayStation 5's out. But that's even more expensive. I gotta start saving again. It's like, I think we're caught in this loop of getting okay and getting knocked down. And then getting okay and getting knocked down. And until we really get knocked down, can we stand straight up and say, I'm okay. Right?
Nice.
And I think that this upcoming year is going to be a pivotal point, right?
Yeah.
The leaders of the world will say, oh, it's going to be the same thing for the next 4 years as it has been these last 4 years. Great, we can keep doing what we're doing. Those tensions escalate. And it could go another way of we get strength back in the executive branch of the federal government. And they can put their foot down and say, try it. And see the hellfire that rains down from our $850 billion defense budget.
That's true. That's true.
Because I don't know. I don't know about the confidence in this administration to make a move like that.
Yeah.
Like Biden just met with President Xi of China. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Where are they? They're in California. They're walking arm in arm.
Oh, they're in California right now?
They look huge. Winnie the Pooh and Joe Biden. Joe Byron.
How nice the shots are whenever they meet, like, different leaders or something like that. It's always, like, so nice, like, so, like, orderly. But
I love state dinners. Like, anytime a foreign leader comes in, I'm 100% an old person. I'm 25 years old. Quarter life crisis. I'm an old person. I watch C-SPAN every single day. And on the days that like foreign leaders come into the country, they have like 10 hours of coverage on how they prepare for this specific leader coming in to the country.
Oh, really?
And I didn't watch any of that today for this meeting. Well, because they're also in California, so it's not like Xi is going to the White House where they would have all these preparations. But those type of things fascinate me. It's like that's not even political. Sort of it is, right? Like, yeah. Like I think that the last one I watched, I don't know who it was, and I don't know where they were from. I wasn't really paying attention, but they were laying out like they had the executive chefs of the White House on camera, and they were laying out all of the meals for the parts of the meal. They were like, here's the appetizers, and it was like that country's type of food, and it's like that's fascinating. I love that. I didn't know that happens, and it makes sense that it happens. But I didn't know that was broadcast. So when I see stuff like that, I'm like, that's kind of cool.
So when it comes to, let's get into next election now. How do you see this all playing out next election? In your honest opinion, do you think it's gonna? Well, first, I guess, like, do you think it's gonna be a smooth transition of power, or do you think there's gonna be a boiling point where people are done and we're gonna see some crazy stuff? Regardless of who wins, like,
I think that January 6th, 2020. That's another thing that would fall into the World War III timeline, right? Like Trump kills Soleimani, and then Jan 6 happens. That's pretty back to back. And Kobe died in that same month too.
Yeah,
right?
that was a very big story at the time. A lot of conspiracies with the Kobe death.
I know it. I'm waiting on the video illusions. I'm waiting on it.
Just to bring up Kobe real quick, though, I did see one thing about Kobe where there was some type of like supplements he was making, or like he was about to like manufacture these like type of like supplements for athletes, and apparently like I can't remember if it was like Gatorade or somebody supposedly had an issue with it, and then a couple days later, Kobe helicopter crashes. That's just complete hypothetical conspiracy. That's all I've heard from it so far. But there's some weird things about the Kobe thing. I won't admit. I mean, I'll admit.
Oh yeah. I think that January 6th almost set a precedent, like warning. Hey, don't do that. To answer your question, yes, I do believe that there will be a peaceful transfer of power. It's hard to say, like, will it be graceful or not? Maybe not, because we have a whole primary season to get through first. So we won't even know our nominees until August.
Do you think the primary season really matters this election run?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Absolutely, because like the way I think about it is, if the DNC is sticking to we're not putting anyone up. Joe Biden is the incumbent president within our party. He will be our nominee.
Yeah, are they able to do that without? Because I thought that people get to vote the nominee that they want for president. So if the party can just decide, no, we're going to pick this guy. I mean, is that what happens?
So how it works is, if you get elected president of the United States, you become the leader of your party. You become the de facto leader of your party. Like, so a lot of people still reference that Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, where we would say no. Technically, Ron McDaniel, the chairman of the RNC, is the leader of the Republican Party because Joe Biden is not a Republican. So it opens up a playbook. Say, okay, how do we get that power back? So then you got to open up the strategy book and say, all right, these are our candidates. We could run with any one of them. Let's put them on a stage together and make them trash talk each other. And the DNC will not do that. They would not do that. As recently as like this fall, they were not planning on hosting debates or hosting debates.
Because that seems very against the word that they love to claim every time.
Well, because it's understood by the DNC that Joe Biden is the leader of the party. So unless it comes from him, if he sits down in a war room with the DNC leadership, probably the Oval Office, they would come to him for sure. And he said, look, I've made this decision that I am not going to seek re-election. I need you guys to start scouting candidates. Maybe there has been that closed door meeting that isn't being talked about publicly, but he would have to go in front of the press and the world and say, I am not running for re-election. And then that would open up the floor for Democrats to debate and try to vie for that nomination. This primary season is absolutely fascinating, dude. Let me tell you, back in the summer, there were 2 Democrat candidates that were actively campaigning, and they wanted to debate, but the DNC would not let them on a stage with Joe Biden. Why? I don't know. Could be because they believe in Joe Biden, and Joe Biden has not said that he isn't running for re-election. Because he did. He announced he is running. And so there's Robert Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson. I think she's from New York. He's from Louisiana.
What do you think about Kennedy?
Well, I like Kennedy. And that's going to be the interesting thing. He is fine. He is one.
And not making it a bad way, but messes can actually change.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I believe that he is the reason these primaries are so important. Because now that he has walked away from the Democratic Party, if at any point the DNC offers up other candidates that is not Joe Biden, and then all of those people start debating against each other, the GOP has been doing that for 3 months now, and Robert Kennedy has listed as an independent and has been campaigning actively for months now. So if the DNC were to put up a candidate, it's kind of late. You almost dropped the ball there. And the way I think about it is one of those candidates on that stage will become a vice presidential pick.
Yeah.
Right? So you need a field of at least 6 original candidates. So hey, here's our roster. Let's start debating. and then seeing where people stand, what the vibe is, the stage presence, and slowly but surely people will be suspending campaigns, going up in polls, going down in polls, and the fact that Robert Kennedy doesn't have to do that, he doesn't have to compete with anyone now. He can run his race, and he's dangerous. And I don't mean that in any physical or violent sense. I mean that, like, from the establishment perspective, we were talking about with Trump, RFK's non-establishment mentality will pull soft Democrats and probably medium to soft Democrats for sure. At least it would appeal to them, it would be attractive to that type of voter.
Yeah.
It would pull swing voters, a majority of independents. He would pull soft Republicans too. So it's like, if you can take 4 of those 7 groups,
That's pretty good. And that's pretty
dangerous. Like, the establishments would work. It would look like Bush, Clinton, and Perot, right? Like, Ross Perot was that monkey wrench that cost H.W. Bush the election in 1990? 92? 92. Yeah, because Reagan was 88. Bush was 88. 92. Anyway. And I firmly believe that RFK would pull more Democrats than Republicans, and we could see a 40%, a 35%, and then a quick math 25% type of outcome in the general election, right? It's like, oh, no one got to 270 votes, but that made a difference. And I actually don't know how that would work, like, because Perot definitely didn't get enough electoral votes to change the outcome. RFK is scary because I think that he could pull enough percentage points away from both candidates, whoever they end up being. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Joe Biden. There are other names out there that are floating that would make it even more important of a primary season.
You don't think they're gonna pull the Michelle Obama card? That last second Hail Mary?
Well, and that would be a dangerous ticket for the Democrats, right?
Yeah. They'd slap if they put her in.
Yeah, if there was that, the 2 names that I'm about to drop have both said that they would not accept the nomination, or they don't want. Like in Michelle Obama's case, she stated that, she's out of politics and she likes it that way, does not want to get back in now that she's been out. And I respect that. Genuinely, I do. Because the campaign life is cutthroat. Like, I used to think that the real beef was between Democrats and Republicans. No, it's Republicans against Republicans and Democrats against Democrats in that primary stage. Some of the things that they say about each other within their own party is like, oh, that's distasteful take.
Oh, they really be going at each other's throats. Yeah,
like, and it's not. Yeah, it So yeah, like I think about the previous debate when Vivek Ramaswamy mentioned Nikki Haley's daughter. Like he didn't necessarily go after. He was trying to make a point about TikTok.
I feel like he made a fair point, but you still brought up somebody's daughter, so I can.
Right, and she's an adult. She's a 25-year-old with her own life, and her mother does not need to be going through her phone as a 25-year-old. You know, it's like that. It was I'd say a mental hiccup. Like you didn't have to go there. You went there, and people will remember that. But it wasn't an aggressive attack. There are definitely some that I get. I understand why Michelle Obama wants to remain out. But then there's also Gavin Newsome, who went on Hannity the night of the first debate, and Sean Hannity asked him, Blake locked eyes with him and said, if for any reason you were given the nomination for the Democrat ticket, would you accept? Gavin Newsom said no on Fox News. At primetime TV, he said no. So it's like, that ticket, though, would be dangerous, right? Like to have Michelle Obama on top and then Gavin Newsom as the VP. Dude, what? You're not only pulling like 12 different demographics worth of votes, you're locking in Illinois, you're locking in California, New York's, you're going to take it. Then you have a lot of swing states that went towards Obama and then flipped towards Trump. I think of Ohio, I think of Pennsylvania. Actually, I think Pennsylvania. Regardless, that would be a dangerous ticket. Both of those people have said within the last year that they don't want it. So I think that RFK would have been that solution. If it was like solution to the DNC, if they let him debate, they didn't, so he walked away. Because like, if it was a ticket like an RFK and like Stacey Abrams, that could be a dangerous ticket too. But RFK's already walked away, and now it's like, ooh, he could Ross Perot it.
Do you think they really dropped the ball on how they handled RFK Jr. with him walking away? Or do you think it was just inevitable he was going to go independent?
Yeah, I think it was inevitable that he was going to go independent. I think that he was strategic to walk away as early as he did.
Yeah.
Because if it got to January and it's like 6 weeks before, 4 weeks, 6 weeks before the caucuses begin, then it's like, oh, like that was a really late change. Like you were campaigning at Democratic county parties and you're going to all these Democrat events, and now you're not. But it's too late to go to Republican events and Republican county party meetings because it's January and we're voting next week. 6 weeks. But because he walked away so early, he's probably been able to do both. A decent amount, and is not going to have to compete with a primary challenger, right? Like now, the thing is, here in Florida, we have closed primaries. So if you are a registered Republican and I am a registered Democrat, I can only vote in Democrat primaries and you can only vote in Republican primaries. So independent candidates, third-party candidates, they don't have a primary. So RFK would not have opposition all the way through up until primary election day in August. Or I guess convention. It's not really an election day. It's convention. With that said, in Georgia, they have open primaries. So I think back to a nuanced experience that one of my local county party chairmen, as I was working for the state party of Georgia, it was my job to coordinate, communicate, and attend county party events in my region. My region had 29 counties, so I met a lot of people and went to a lot of meetings. A lot of events, they were a lot of fun, but this one county party chairman, if in the database I looked up their name and their information, I would see that the party affiliation attached to that voter was a soft Democrat. And I was like, no, that's bad. What's it like? Why? So I scrolled down, looked at the published public history, and every single primary season, that chairman asked for a Democrat primary ballot to cancel out one of the Democrat voting people. So, like, if you're voting for Stacey Abrams and I vote for Joe Schmo on that same ticket, okay, Stacey Abrams has one less vote. So, like, I understood after they explained it to me. I was like, I need to know. I'm curious. But it's like now on data centers that have that same type of data could list that person as a swing type of voter. And it's like, no, that's one of the most conservative people I've ever met.
Yeah, there you go.
But they were trying to be strategic about playing the primary. So in states that have open primaries, that will happen way more. And independents, third parties, would have a ballot. They would have their own separate ballot of like however many names in that state qualified to get on the ballot. They would have that. Then there would be a Democrat and a Republican. I might be wrong, but I don't believe that in closed primary states, independent candidates have. Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know. When's the last time you got your driver's license updated?
Actually, a couple months ago.
Did you have to check a box for like party affiliation? Or was there even that option?
Not that I remember.
No. That's easy enough to check. But I'm pretty sure, I mean, I could be wrong, but in closed primary states, an independent ballot is not offered because, and I guess theoretically it could be, right? Like, if on your voter registration card or on the website you check the from the state, let's see. This is such an old website. We gotta update this. elections. There we go. Let's see. Third-party voter registration organizations. Interesting. Let's see. No. Let's see. That's okay. But I mean, ultimately, to answer your question, these primaries are, if not exciting, interesting, fascinating, because there's so much that could happen that will impact the world next election. Next November, everything could change for the better or for the worse. Just have to wait and see.
Okay, just to play hypotheticals, we'll end it with this. Who do you think, coming this next election season, who do you think's got the best shot at really taking this? Not your pick on who you want, but who do you think has genuinely, from what you've seen, who do you think really has the actual best shot so far?
My analysis would be that if the Democrats run with the same ticket, Biden-Harris, I think that's a clean, easy GOP victory. Like, absolutely. If the Democrats change up, I'm fascinated by how we will respond. When I say we, I mean the GOP. The GOP will respond in nominating their candidate, the choice of the vice president, what that ticket looks like, because I see bright spots on all of the remaining GOP candidates. I think Christie's still in it, and it's like, yeah, he's still in it. Oh yeah, I saw that on C-SPAN earlier. But it's like, when it comes to Christie, I like that he has district attorney experience, like as a litigator. I love that. Like, that's a good strength to have in an executive office. I like Vivek Ramaswamy's confidence, his enthusiasm. I like some of his hot takes. I think that most of the electorate, is not ready for his perspective. And I think that he is the trend of the GOP. I think that the Republican Party is moving towards his perspective. I don't know that they're there yet. I like Nikki Haley's foreign policy experience. I mean, that's a big one for me. When it comes to my politics, the first two things I look at is international relations and the economy. Everything else after that is secondary. So, okay, that's a nice supplement. I like DeSantis. I do. I think that what he's been able to do here over the last 6 years? I guess 2018, 5 years, has been impressive, incredible. Like I think governors make excellent presidents because technically Ron DeSantis is the president of Florida, sitting in the executive office of the state is a good precedent to have if you're going to be president of the United States. I liked Tim Scott. I know he already dropped out. I think that the bickering between Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, I worry that that's all people will remember of those two. And it's like, both of them in their own right have brilliant points and are very affluent speakers. But then they go at each other's throats all the time. And I can't say that I know who started, because it doesn't matter. People will remember the bickering. And I like Trump. I mean, he has experience being president of the United States and did not do a bad job at that either. Like, he has it on the resume. He's already got a base. Like, I mean, that's the big thing. He's got base supporters that will rally. He definitely lost some of that base through the events of January 6th. He definitely did, which is probably a fair portion of the viewers of this debate, unless you're just a nerdy Politico like me and watch it for fun, do a bingo card. But it's like, I think that we have strength. We have depth. That's what the GOP has. We have depth in our roster to say, okay, we can go a bunch of different ways. Where the clock is ticking, the DNC to change up if they're going to change up, and if they don't change up, I think whoever is nominated on the GOP side, it'll be a cakewalk. Because it ultimately does become Democrat versus Republican, again, going for each other's throats, but whoever the Republican nominee is will use everything from these last 4 years as ammunition against the Biden-Harris ticket.
Yeah.
So I definitely danced around your question because I'm not trying to call out one specific candidate. Because I believe that we have depth. We have different people with different strengths that if you found the right combination of people and strengths, you can have a dangerous ticket, right? Yeah. What else do you have?
Let me think. So we've gone over the military complex. We went over the election fraud. We went over the candidates in the election for next year. We went over World War III. Let me try to think if I have any other quote. We went over the big things today that I definitely wanted to go over. Really great points that you had, by the way. I just gotta say. Interesting points. You definitely really made me kind of at least look at things in a different limelight, different way. So I'm definitely gonna have a lot of thinking after we get off this call about what we talked about. I guess like the biggest thing, the biggest point that stuck out to me the most out of anything you said tonight was, and there was a lot of points that really stuck out to me, but the one that like really stuck out to me the most again was the World War III. The fact that at this point, like it's been started years ago, but these things take a while to, at least for us to realize. It takes a while for. It reminds me of the analogy of the frog in the boiling water pot. You know, you put a frog in a pot of water, and if you just throw him into a boiling pot of water, he's gonna freak the hell out. But you put him in a regular bowl of water, and you slowly raise the temperature up, and he doesn't notice until he's dead. And it seems like that really is like we're the frog in the water pot, and the temperature is just getting raised, and we don't fully realize that we're in a boiling pot. And I really liked that point that you made. I thought that was just a fascinating point. When it comes to all of these like scary things, all of these what ifs and questions that we have in the future, like obviously like these past 4 years especially has been very difficult on everybody. There's a lot of fears when it comes to wars, the election, our economy, inflation, so many things. Do you think, despite everything going on in today's age, do you think there is a genuine hope for the future that there's a way to right this ship? Or do you think things are already set in stone to the past where it's inevitable and we are going down this path of these things that we're afraid of?
So it does. It does. And I'm definitely gonna ask you to remind me of it because I'm gonna forget it. Because I want to amend my answer to when you asked the question, who do you think will win?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to win. I think that everyone next year is going to lose in some manner, right? Like, whether the Oval Office remains with the same administration, people will lose. If it's turned over, I think that the global establishment that is pushing, that is tightening its tension, they will lose. Yeah, I think that there would be a victory here at home, but then it's not an immediate solution, right? It's going to take time to repair. Ultimately, we are overhead in debt. There's no getting around it. No matter who wins, everyone is still losing until something happens. And I think the question that you just asked was along the lines of, all this tension and activity that's going on around the globe. Will we ever get back to a cohesive environment? Globally, I don't think soon. Whenever anyone talks about open borders, I almost feel like a small spark of nationalism saying, look, if you're not proud of where you're from, that's one thing. But to take that away from everyone and just open every border and land is land and you can go to and from where you want, I think that discounts culture, it discounts religion, it discounts the people, the economy. When you talk about a globalist, socialist type of society, it's the needs of the people in the state of Georgia versus the needs of the people in the state of Washington or Oregon are starkly different. Not necessarily because of population or difference in nationality or culture, but geographically, those needs are different. So you need to have local governments with defined orders to say, hey, this type of organization of people, this government, will be most effective for this little part of the globe. You know? So I never see that happening nationally, or globally. As far as nationally, because we are so massive, there is not another state like the United States in the world where how it should be thought about is each individual state. If you're taking an international relations course, they will define a state and a nation as the same term because it's a nation state. So each individual state within the United States has its own constitution, its own set of rules, its own governments. And that's good. It's when the federal government oversteps its power and tries to encroach on states' rights, the 9th and 10th Amendment, where that tension builds. And then there's that argument of, but it's a public service, like it's a human necessity, or it should be a service. And then that makes me think about Roe v. Wade, right? I am unapologetically pro-life. I support life. But I will not judge another person based on the choices they made because they're their own people, they live their own lives, and ultimately they have to live with the decision that they make. Whichever way it goes, they have to live with it. My thing against that particular Roe versus Wade was I don't want my federal tax dollars to be paying for any type of abortion at any stage in the abortion out in Michigan or California, Hawaii, Nevada. If the state that I'm living in, which we're seeing that now, the states are voting on these measures. The people within the states are deciding what they want to stand up for, as it should be. But when the federal government starts encroaching on the states' rights, that's where that tension tightens. And I think that we've almost hit a climax of polarization within the country, which, I guess the ultimate climax would be civil war. No one's wishing for that. No one wants that. I don't believe anyone wants that. I don't believe it. But I think that for the entire country to sober up and pull together as one and be proud to be Americans again will come at the cost of the tragedy. Similar to a 9/11 right? It didn't matter, like, what political views you had. You're an American. A Pearl Harbor, right? It doesn't matter what views you had. You banded together. And I hate that it has to get to that point for people to stop hating each other. Stop killing each other. I can't stand that. But I think that there will be a peaceful transfer of power in 2024, and the resulting global worldview after that point will set the tone for how we continue to heal domestically, right? Because Eisenhower was right. The military-industrial complex is ripping its claws into our everyday life. And you can't go anywhere without someone talking about it. And I don't mind it because I studied it and I'm good at talking about it. But I know that there are a lot of people that politics just makes them uncomfortable. And that's okay. As it should be. But it's like, we got to a point. I'm going to say that this started in. I'm going to blame Obama. I'm going to say it started in 2008. Let's see, I just did it. What I'm about to complain about, I just did it. But, like, there's a lack of respect for the office of the presidency. Right? Like, I remember growing up, and if you were to talk about the president, it was President Bush. Like, that was his title. That was his name. You called him that. That's how the media addressed him, President Bush. And then 2008 came around, and it almost became casual to say Obama rather than President Obama. Right? The media, the news outlets, they would just say Obama. And okay, yeah, I know who you're talking about. That's the president. And then that continued in 2016 with Trump. Not President Trump, it's Trump. Trump. And they still do it to this day. And it's like, I didn't really see too many memes or like absolutely harsh memes about Obama. I didn't really see those. But that definitely began with Trump. And it's certainly continuing now with President Biden. And it's like, I think that there has been a reduction of the respect that the office of the presidency demands. And I don't know how to get that back. But it's like, dude, I don't know. I don't even remember the original question. I think I answered it.
It's okay. It's an interesting point that you make though, because like on one hand, you could look at it and you could say, well, you know what? I don't care who you put in the office. I don't care any of these people because these people have screwed me over for the past 30 years. So fuck whatever title you give them. I can understand that point, but then I can also understand the other point where it's like, yeah, that might be true. But if we all decide to have that mindset and that attitude, and we continue to have that mindset and attitude for years to come, the respect and the cohesion each year will dissipate so much to the point where we just can't even completely work together at all anymore. When it comes to leadership trying to tell us to do anything, we're just giving the bird. And that's not good. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's good. I don't think it's... I mean, but also, what's kind of interesting, I don't think it's just the presidency, Chris. I think what we're seeing is a lack of respect for authority in general. But I think it's two things. Well, a couple things. I think definitely the first thing is I think authority has failed, honestly, for the most part. I don't think just in governments. I'm also talking about in families. How many families do you know where you actually see two parents that are married together and actually have a cohesive relationship, where they're not fighting in front of the kids?
Right?
How many?
I had a pretty good pair of parents.
But you and me had some really good parents. But how many of all of our friends that I know, that besides my girlfriend, all of them are. You know what I mean?
That's my white privilege. Right. Yeah, mom and dad. That's my white privilege. Yeah,
but I think it's.
I agree.
And it's not just with parents, dude. It's with teachers.
Yep.
Oh, I would never be a teacher at today's age, man.
Yeah. Like I remember when it was detention worthy, or if it was really bad, really whatever the word is, to use your phone in class, you couldn't do that.
Oh yeah.
You had to use the materials that the school provided, and now it's kids are just bringing their iPads and their phones into class, and it's are you definitely doing schoolwork on that?
Yeah.
Are you I don't know.
I think a lot of people I've noticed a lot of people give slack when it comes to the teachers and the administration when they're saying you guys aren't disciplining them, you can't control these kids. But I would argue at the end of the day, it's really not the teachers and the administration's job to fully discipline their kids. Because I remember when I was a kid, teachers and authority like that never scared me. I was never afraid of that. What I was scared of is my dad finding out and him coming home. That scared the shit out of me.
That's right.
And that's what kept me in line and in check. It honestly my dad. But most of these kids don't even have a dad, or B, they definitely don't have a dad that actually disciplines. And
you said the word.
There's nobody to put you in your place. Because I know when it comes to my father was very good at basically putting me in my place and basically explaining to me look, David, this is your place in the world. When you accomplish things, when you do things, you can move up in the world. But understand, you are here, I am here. And to really understand that as a kid and to get that teaching, I really do believe it really completely changes the way that you're gonna act in the future. Because
you speak a magic word. When you said discipline, think of that's the nail on the head, right? I firmly believe that we were born at a time where technology was just really starting to kick off, right? I remember the earlier days of the internet, the original YouTube, the original Instagram, and all those iOS games on original iPhone Touch, MiniClip.com, dude, yeah, and now it's children as early as 4 years old, instead of if a kid is crying, acting out in public, first off, that's a scary ride home.
Yeah.
And not a fun time. But it's those kids are now acting out in public, and then the parents turn around and instead of disciplining them, they distract them with an iPad, with a phone. They give them a screen, a piece of technology to say that You're bothering me. You're bothering other people. Do something else but that. Instead of putting them in their place and saying, hey, we're in a restaurant. You cannot scream like an animal. And that then bleeds into schools, right? Like into the classroom. The teacher can't discipline because all of these children are so coddled and sensitive. And it's like, if you're not getting yelled at school or at home, I worry about it. I don't know that I worry about it because, like, we were definitely raised on the internet, and we turned out okay.
But I think, Chris, the difference between you and me is, I think the structure of family we had, and because of the structure of family we had discipline.
Yes.
And I think, I honestly, really, genuinely think it is that simple. I know there's a lot of other factors and other things that go into it, but I honestly believe, like, even though we went through this age of this crazy internet age where we were exposed to so many things, despite that, like, I know, as for you personally, I would say that you are genuinely one of the most upstanding people I've ever met in my life. And I know, and I'm not saying this to butter you up, but I know also from other people as well too, when they talk about you, they only have good things to say. It's always, oh yeah, Chris is awesome. Chris did this for me. Like, it's always, you did something for them, you were nice to them, your hospitality. It's always something respectful, like, towards you. And I think it's because of the way you carry yourself, and I think the reason you're like that is because of your family, the structure you had, your parents. Because I feel like what motivates you, maybe, or at least for me, is I would hate to disappoint them. Even when they die, their teachings and the discipline stick with me. And in my head, I still feel like my father personally, he passed away. But I still feel like everything I do, he sees it. And I feel like it's weird. Like, I'll know when I'm doing something, and I know when, like, he wouldn't approve of it. And there's a feeling, there's a weight that hits me, and I'm like, damn, if he was right here, could I look him in the face?
Right.
And that really changes a lot of my decisions and affects the way I think and the way that I operate in my life. So,
yeah.
And I just feel like it's sad, bro, because, like, it's not these kids' fault, bro. It's not.
No.
Like, kids who are just born into broken homes that, there's no, like, guidance in them, bro. There's no, like, somebody. It's like, dude, I know of parents where, like, they have kids because they get money from government, or they just use these kids for just horrible things, bro. You know what I mean? And it's just like, no wonder we're so messed up, bro. No wonder so many kids are messed up. It's like nobody wants to, and I would say nobody wants to take, or not nobody, because there's a lot of really solid parents out there, a lot of solid single parents out there too that are really just trying their fucking best, and they're doing the best they can. But I feel like just collectively, I feel like we've kind of, like, walked away from our responsibilities, and I think we've gotten more in the mindset of somebody else's problem to deal with. That's not my problem. Like, an example would be like, I know back in the day, like, if you were a coach or something like that, or like my one friend, his name is Dondre. He had a grandfather that passed away a couple years ago, but he was a man who was a man of the community, who, not just his own friends and family, but he would help out people in the community with jobs, like, opportunities. Like, he was like a tree of like, life for, like, so many people, right? And he wasn't responsible for all those people. He didn't have to put his hand out or do any for those people, but because he decided that, hey, that is my responsibility. I am going to extend what I've been given in life, and I'm going to give other people an opportunity. I feel like back in the day we had that mindset more often, and it helped us more for the better. And I feel like because things have just slowly gotten just worse and worse and worse, that love for people, that giving people a chance, has just we've lost it, or we've lost our way in that. Or what do you think?
I think you're right. When my father passed away this past December, and I remember speaking at his funeral, and the first word that I didn't write it down. I didn't prepare it or anything, but I got up there, just let it roll off the tongue. The first word that came to mind was role model. Like, I learned my father never, but definitely indirectly taught me lessons that have stuck with me from childhood all the way through the end of my life. Like, indirectly taught me those lessons. I had to directly learn those lessons from other scenarios, because he had experienced something similar and knew how to handle it. But the first time it hit me, I didn't know. I was caught off guard, and I had to think about, how do I react in this situation? What would my role model do? And that has built my character. I learned from Boy Scouts that respect is not given; you have to earn it. Even though in that Scout law, Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Just be respectful is Scout is trustworthy. No, that's not even one of them. But it's like those established my morals and ethics. So did my faith. I went to a private Catholic school from kindergarten through 10th grade, so it's like that indirectly influenced my morals and ethics.
Yeah.
Because the teachers were allowed to be a little bit more strict, have some discipline, not any. I didn't have nuns that struck me with yardsticks.
Private school discipline is actually discipline. There's order in private school.
Right. It was structured, and it was good. And then I think back on it, it's like, ultimately, my mom sacrificed her career to be at home for me and my sister. And my dad sacrificed almost all of his free time to work and then come home and play with us or take us to sports, coach us in sports. And it's like, to have those two role models who, from beginning to end, set the tone of how your character should be. And my dad and I disagreed on some. My mom and I disagree on a lot. But there's a candor and a respect between our conversations that I try to emulate in every conversation. Because, at the end of the day, why would they communicate with me like that if they didn't expect me to communicate with others like that? So I agree with you.
I guess to end off with
And
oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
I was just gonna say, I was gonna add on to the point you were making. My dad used to say a saying that's always stuck with me. I'm gonna kind of botch it, but the gist of it was, nobody cares about what you have to say unless they know that you care about them.
Let me hear that again.
Nobody cares what you have to say unless they know that you care about them.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
I really believe that. Like, I remember when my dad first told me that, I was like, "Dad, what are you talking about?" Like,
Right.
and I was thinking I was like 16 or something when he told me that, and I just didn't listen to it. But then, like, as I'm like going through life and stuff like that, and I'm having experiences with people, and I'm not gonna lie, when my high school years, I was not the best person. I 100% was did not handle myself in situations with people the way it should have. Definitely should have been a lot nicer to individuals. But I noticed that whenever I would talk to people, or whenever I'd have like strong beliefs with something, and I was trying to communicate it to somebody, I noticed like they weren't listening. Because like a lot of times, like I would just be, I would come across as like arrogant, mean, know-it-all, in different ways like that. And it wasn't until I really like sat down and like thought about like what my dad said. I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like nobody cares about what you have to say unless you know that you care about them. And then I started thinking about it in my own personal life, and I'm like, well, think about it, David. Like when people are talking to you and discussing things with you, like when do you listen to them and when do you shut them out? And I really sat there and I thought about it. And I was like, well, when I really have respect towards someone, or when I really feel like when I'm talking to someone, they're actually listening to me, regardless of what they'll say, I'll hear them out. Because they've given me the respect where at least I feel like they care about what I'm saying. So because they're going to give me that, I have to give them that back. Because if they're going to give me that and I'm not going to give them that back. So like to me, it's like that's that level of like, yeah, you might be crazy, you might be a numbnut, but I care about you enough to, I'm going to hear you out. Whatever you have to say.
And I think that there's a lack of that, of caring. Not even necessarily about like the other person. You know, like if we have lost the art of debate, of discord, like we've lost the art of the discussion. Okay, we disagree, but let me hear your point. I'll make my point, and maybe we can find something to agree on. Yeah. And maybe it's not that I respect what you believe. Maybe I don't at all. But I respect you for standing up for what you believe in. I think too often a topic comes up that is like, I'm going to call you out on that, and then immediately the conversation shut down. No, I don't want to talk about it. We're not going to get into that. Why? Like, why won't you defend what you are standing up for? Like, if you can't
stand
discuss,
yeah,
right? It's like, okay, like, yeah, like, and then I don't respect that. It's like, don't talk shit just to hear yourself say it.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
You have to have some substance behind it. Or it's just,
you gotta be willing to take it if you're gonna give it to. I've noticed that too. Like, I've noticed when, and I've definitely noticed this in myself a lot too. Like, I'm a fixer-upper if there ever was one. But, like, I've noticed when it comes to, especially with, like, really heated hot takes, like, abortion's one of them. Like, anything like that. Guns, that's another one. Like, any, like, really, people get fired up with just a word, you know what I mean? And it's just like,
the one-issue voters.
Yeah, and it's like, on one hand, I love the passion. Regardless of, like, whatever side, like, if you're willing to really, like, stand up for what you believe and really fight for that, and really just be like, nah, I don't care, like, this is the way, like, on one hand, I can respect that to like fight for it, but like I also believe like fighting for what you believe in too is just like what you're saying. Like if you're gonna fight for it, you have to back it up because like if you believe in something, if you truly believe in something, and especially if you have a platform or you have a voice, or if you're just around anybody and you're talking about it, if you don't know what you're talking about, you didn't do the due diligence and actually like being able to have a discourse with other people. When people see you out in the open or whenever you're talking about it, most people are going to look at you like you're an idiot. And it's going to hurt your cause, it's going to hurt your case, and it's going to make everybody who believes in what you believe in look stupid.
Bingo! Yeah!
It makes everybody look like a perfect example is like I remember, or like, I've noticed we get into arguments about like silly things. Like one thing I can remember was this is like a couple years ago or something like that. Do you remember that whole like meme going around like the it's okay to be white? You remember that like slogan, like Kanye, like Paris or whatever? And like, people were actually like arguing about that. And like I know when it comes to like the Republican side, I know like in their camp, they're looking at this like a troll. Obviously, white people matter. Obviously, it's okay to be white. But they know that certain people on the left, no matter what it is they're going to say, they're going to argue about it. Or they're going to go against it. So in their minds, they're like, okay, let's bring the stupidest opinion, the stupidest thing possible, and get them to argue against it. Because they'll look completely, like, to normal, like, I guess, like, when you're having, like, like, when you present
look like the victim.
Yeah, it's like when you present the question, like, is it okay to be white? And it's like, really the only answer to that question is, yeah, it's okay to be white. Why would you even ask a stupid question like that? And then move on with that. But the fact that you sit there and you argue about it, to people in your domain, they're going to be like, yeah. But like anybody else who's looking at that specific situation, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. It's like, well, I'm white. That's actually, I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
That's what I mean. Like we've also gotten to a point where like, and that's just like one example. Like there's examples on the right side, the left side, whatever.
Yeah.
There's plenty of like ridiculous things that we're arguing about that just like don't fucking matter as well too.
Yeah.
Or like I've noticed we get caught up in just trying to be right. Like it's not necessarily, it doesn't matter anymore on like what's genuinely like
accountability.
Yeah, there's no accountability. Oh my gosh, bro, that's another thing I've noticed too, man. Like the accountability everywhere, bro. It's like nobody wants to admit, like, yo, I messed up. I did this one. Like whether it's politics, your jobs, or like anything. Like nobody wants to be that person that's like, but like, but it's just the way you get. I guess.
I know. I was one of the other, I guess, slogans of my life is, you know, if you fail to prepare, be prepared to fail. And I try to hold myself accountable to that. Like, you know, if I failed at something, own up to it. I didn't prepare well enough to begin with. And now the next time I go at it, I'll have a better idea of how to handle the situation.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so important to say what you mean and do what you say. You have to follow through, and then you have to remain accountable to your actions. Like, you can't just view what you read on TikTok and Snapchat and then have no other backing or basis behind it. You know, like, okay, that's cool.
To go off on your point,
I disagree with your point, but let me see the citations.
Yeah, and it's insane because especially with the news media. Oh my goodness, bro! These past couple, it's probably. I mean, I've only been watching the news since like I was born in 2000, so I only really started watching the news when I was like 16. So I only know what I know, but it's oh my goodness, I just lost track of the point we were just. What were we just talking about, Chris?
We talked about accountability, and
oh, okay, accountability. When it comes to the news media, I have noticed, especially with the COVID stuff, there has been so many instances and times where media personalities or government officials come out and tell us one thing, and then 2 years later go around and then they act like they never said that, even though we have video footage of them still saying it, and it's hard to find because a lot of it's been scrubbed off the internet. It's a whole another topic of debate, but just saying, still there, you can find it. But it actually blows my mind when I see things like that, when it's just blatant, like, lies. Just blatant lies. Like, there's a difference between, like, oh, I got fucked up, I messed up. But it's another thing to just, like, you said it on camera. We have video footage of you saying it. And now you're telling me to my face that you didn't say that when I'm watching the video of you saying it. You know what I mean? There's plenty of examples with that. Again, just like with COVID, it was a lot of stuff was like that with COVID.
I think that it probably started about the same time as, again, to blame Obama. About 2008, it used to be so taboo to ask about another person's politics. Like, you just didn't do it. You didn't ask.
Like, you talk about religion or politics. I remember growing up hearing that.
Right, like, you didn't ask who you voted for. Like, that was a private, personal privilege. And then, I mean, you're right, like, I definitely didn't start actually watching the news until probably about 2012, like Obama's second campaign. But it's like, by that point, it was already partisan. It started with the journalists. Like, there used to be, journalists did not speak in a partisan bias, right? Like, if all of these news outlets clearly have a bias, right? Whether it's Fox, definitely has a conservative bias, and everything else, well, not everything else, but we'll use CNN. CNN, clearly very liberal bias. And then once our news starts to make that less taboo or not taboo, then it's like, socially, if our leaders on media, if our leaders are not showing respect, why are we going to show each other respect? Right? Like, I think it started at the same time that there was a partisan stance in media. Our journalists vocalized support, and then it became like, it's not that you don't ask who someone voted for is anymore. It's, I assume that person voted for this because they're wearing that shirt. It's like, no, maybe it's a meme. Like, fuck you, Pepe the Frog.
It has gotten to that point. Yeah, it's
like, remember when Hillary Clinton turned Pepe the Frog into what was the word that she used? It was a hate crime.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, like
terrorists or something.
right. Yeah. What are you talking about? It's a meme. I think that people have lost the way of humility, laughing at yourself, like taking a joke. You know, like, if you're not going to be accountable, if you're not going to stand up and apologize for being wrong, show a little humility and laugh at yourself when we make fun of you, right? Like, right.
No, I definitely. Illusion people, thank you again for watching us tonight. We're gonna try to get the podcast a little bit more active. The podcast has just started a couple months ago, but I've just been going through a moving process, so now I've fully moved in, got the whole process situated. So when it comes to the podcast, expect at least 2 a month now. So just want to let you guys know about that as well. But as always, keep your eyes open.